Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about opening possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you've got options. Today, we're going to be talking about success. What is this thing we call success, and what do successful people do differently from the average? And what methods have they implemented? After the conversation with our guest, I'll be sharing today's grounds for thought. So stay tuned. When you think of the term the success factor, what comes to mind? If first and foremost you thought of how success is built, you'd be correct. There's probably no one in the world who knows success as well as my guest this week, Dr. Ruth Gotian, faculty at Cornell and personal coach. She has dedicated her career to studying successful individuals in order to understand what earned them success. The author of The Success Factor, Developing the Mindset and Skill Set for Peak Performance, and winner of the Thinkers 50 Distinguished Achievement Radar Award, and much more. Dr. Ruth Gotian. Dr. Ruth,
Hello.
welcome to Unlocked.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to this. But first of all, I'm curious. What is this Thinkers 50 award? I looked it up, but I didn't feel completely satisfied. What is the award about?
Thinkers 50 is called the Oscars of management thinking. So, those of us who geek out about knowledge and thought leadership in the business and management sector, this is our playground and these are our Oscars. And the Radar Award is, which I received in 2021, is for the top emerging management thinker in the world.
Wow.
So I guess they thought I had something important to say.
Well, based on your book, I think you do. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think what people really mean about success is not quite the full story. Why don't you expand on what success has been?
It's tough, right? Because we know it when we see it, but we can't always define it. And the early part of my research was to define success for my research. And I was studying extreme success. In that research, what I found out is that success actually has three parts. Now, it's different for every person, but this is what makes extreme success as a definition. This is how I knew who to search for. The first thing is they created a paradigm shift in the way we do things, think about things, or process things. We're doing things differently because of something that they have accomplished. That's the first step. The second step is as they are climbing through the ranks, they are pulling other people up with them because they believe that a light on someone else does not detract from the light on them. They're all about spreading the light. And last but not least, when they reach the top echelon of success in their field, they mentor the next generation. They pay it forward. And they're either mentoring in a one-to-one capacity or in a one-to-many capacity. So those are the three things that help us define success amongst extreme high achievers. Now, how they got there is a whole separate story.
Oh. I really appreciate how you have expanded the definition to success to include the impact signals of success, pulling others up with you and paying forward. It makes the definition much broader than the individual feeling, oh, I've been successful. There adds a kind of an obligation there. So what drew you to this?
How did I become so obsessed with success? I grew up in New York, so I was surrounded by successful people. Not that I knew them, but I saw them. Right. So if you just take the subway down to New York, you see all the corporate types and you see all the Broadway actors and the dancers and you see all the academic types. So you are surrounded by all of that. And I always wondered, how did they get there? What did they do that I haven't figured out yet?
Mhm.
And I was always curious. And I wound up leading what's called an MD PhD program for the students who get both degrees, both the MD and the PhD degrees. And this program only had a 3.5% acceptance rate, which means you had a better chance of getting into Stanford than you did this program. And even amongst these students, and we only took about 15 a year, even amongst these students, there were those that would just float to the top.
Mm.
And everyone, for this is a tough program. It's 8 years long. It's brutal. And a lot of people would leave in the middle. This is a national problem. And for 20 years, we were talking at our annual meetings about what we called the leaky pipeline, those who were leaving and the attrition. And I have always been more interested in those who were staying and those who were achieving great success. And I believed that we were looking at the wrong problem. I didn't think we should focus on those who were leaving. I thought instead we should focus on those who are achieving incredible success. How do we get more of those people?
Yeah.
So at the age of 43, I went to answer that question. I went back to school to get my doctorate and researched that question and have been continuing researching successful people ever since.
I really appreciate that approach because often when I did my research on resilience, I looked at those people who were highly resilient because
Mm-hmm.
that's what I wanted to aspire to and to help other people to aspire to. So
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that. So let's talk about what you found in your research. What were the conclusions that you came to? You must have learned a lot about behaviors, attitudes, all kinds of things.
I have. So one of the first things that I learned was that the little we have learned about success, because, excuse me, we're never taught in school how to succeed. We're taught stuff, but we're never taught how to succeed. And what we have learned, all these sound bites of wake up at 5 a.m. and make
Yeah.
your bed before you do anything else and read for 5 hours a day, those are habits. Those are other people's habits.
Mm.
And what I quickly learned was that you cannot copy and paste somebody else's habits into your own life because it's your life, it's not their life. And you have different pressures and different privileges that you could employ. So if you're a night owl and you don't go to bed at till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to wake up at 5 a.m. So that's when I figured you could not copy somebody else's habits. But what you can do is emulate mindsets. And I realized there were 4 things. Didn't matter if you were an astronaut or an Olympic champion figure skater. It was the same 4 things that all of these high achievers have done. All right, you ready? We need a drum roll, and I'll tell you
Oh,
the 4.
you know what? Let me see if I can copy it. I can give you a drum roll. I have
Oh,
new.
yes.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Drum roll. That is awesome. Okay. So here comes the first one. The first one is you've heard of you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. It's partly true, but not exactly true, right? It's really what they're talking about is the intrinsic motivation, that fire in your belly, the reason you get out of bed in the morning, the reason you can't quiet your mind at night. This is your reason for breathing. It is your reason for being on earth. You can't not do it. Your focus is always on finding ways to do it better and more efficiently. Now, this is different from extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is when you're doing it for that carrot, for that diploma, for that bonus, for that award, for the Olympic medal. That's when other people judge you. And when other people judge you, it's hard to maintain that motivation.
Yes.
In fact, I have interviewed many Nobel Prize winners. I don't know of a single one who quit doing science just because they won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
If anything, they doubled down because they were curious. They loved the science. They loved the research. The Nobel Prize is nice. It's a nice milestone along the way, but that was never their goal.
Yeah.
So that is the first one. That's intrinsic motivation. You want to tap into that. You have to figure out what your passion is and double down. Now, obviously, you need some talent also.
I want to go back to that real quick, Ruth.
Sure.
Because as soon as you said that, I thought to myself, that's something that never runs out.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's actually from within you. It's part
Yeah,
of who you are. That's
right.
exciting. Okay.
That's
Sorry.
right. But it does change over time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because our
Yep.
passions in our
Yes.
40s are not the same passions we had when
Absolutely.
we were in our 20s. So we need to revisit what those are. One of the things I talk about is doing a passion audit to figure out what it is that you are interested in. And in fact, if any of your viewers want to do their own passion audit, there is one they could just download from my website at ruthgotian.com
Okay.
slash passion audit as one word. And they
Passion
can,
audit.
yes,
Right.
and they can download their own. So that's the first one. The second element of success is, sure, you need to work hard. Yeah, you need to work really hard. And you need the resilience, and you need the perseverance, and you need the work ethic. But really, what it came down to is how you approach challenges.
Mm.
One of the things that all the extreme high achievers do is they never question if they will overcome a challenge. Instead, they focus on how. And they ask themselves, what is the strategy I haven't thought of yet?
Mm.
In fact, one of the stories that I share in my book, The Success Factor, is the story of Dr. Peggy Whitson, who's a biochemist who worked at NASA and dreamt of becoming an astronaut. And she applied, was rejected, applied again, and was rejected. And this went on for a decade. And I said to her, I said, who applies for the same job for 10 years?
Yeah.
She said, my question was never if I was going to become an astronaut. I knew I would become an astronaut. I just had to figure out how. So it's a good thing that she worked on that strategy and didn't give up, because ultimately she went on to become the first female commander of the International Space Station, a role she held twice. She spent more days in space than any American astronaut of any gender.
Good for
And
her.
ultimately, this astronaut who applied over and over again for her dream job went on to become NASA's chief astronaut.
Wow.
So again, it's not a question of if, it's a question of how. They see what they can control and double down on that, and don't worry about the things that they cannot control.
Mm.
So that's the second one.
Okay.
You ready for the third one?
Absolutely.
All right.
Excited.
So Kobe Bryant was notorious for being at the gym before sunrise and working out and working on his layups. And really, what he was doing was the same warm up that you would see any junior high basketball player doing in their gym at any hour. And the point is, it doesn't matter how successful you are, you never rest on your laurels. What made you great at the beginning is what you continue doing later. The warm ups are exactly the same. You don't skip the warm ups
Yeah.
just because you've won a championship, right?
Yeah.
You always go back to your techniques. The scientists are still designing experiments. That's not something that they turf to somebody else. The athletes are still working to perfect their techniques. So that becomes muscle memory
You know,
over and again.
my sister is a pianist. And
Mm-hmm.
we used to do concerts and things. And I said, how do you prepare for it? She said, I do the scales.
Yeah,
She said, if I can do the scales, then I know my fingers will be able to interpret what I feel.
that's
And I
right.
thought, wow, scales of all things.
That's good. 7 notes over and over again in different sequences.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to a two-time Tony Award winner, and I said, how do you warm up? She said, the same way I've always warmed up. I sing the vowels. I sing when she said I do it. And then the older I get, the harder it got to hit certain notes. So she said, I did it while running because she needed to expand her lung capacity.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
was the same. She kept doing, she said, I do the scales and vowels. So that's the
Marvelous.
third one. Now,
That's the
the
third one.
last one, and this is the one that surprised me the most, despite all of their awards, all of their accolades, all the things that they've achieved, They are still out to learn more. And that to me was fascinating. So you've heard of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Mark Cuban that they're reading 3 to 8 hours a day. It's not reading that made them billionaires. It's opening their minds up to new knowledge. So they do it by reading because what they want to do is start to make connections between 2 points that other people aren't yet noticing. And they can only do that by opening up their mind. So, sure, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Mark Cuban love to read. That's their way of doing it. But there are other ways that you can get new knowledge. Hopefully, we're sharing some good stuff here. So, anybody
I think
watching,
so.
right, could learn new things.
Yeah.
You can also listen to podcasts. You could take LinkedIn learning courses. You can talk to other people. All of the high achievers surrounded themselves not with one, but with a team of mentors who believed in them more than they believed in themselves. And trust me, even with multiple Olympic medals, they still have imposter syndrome like everybody else.
Oh gosh, as you're going through these characteristics, I'm thinking of how I talk to people about resilience and the aspect of curiosity.
Yeah.
Highly resilient people are insatiably curious.
Yeah.
And this fits in perfectly with what you're saying, that not only do you need to persist and get over challenges, which is also a characteristic of resilient people, but that you have to stay in that learning mode and that open mode.
Yes,
Mm.
that's right. And they're not afraid to ask for help. And they're not afraid to say, I don't know. And I think that is one of the key factors. They don't pretend to know all the answers, but they know that they can ask the right people and get to the right answers. But the only way they can do that is to say, I don't know,
I don't
or
know.
I don't understand. Do you know how many decades of my life it took me before I realized that's actually a point of strength?
Yes, I understand that one. Because when I used to teach at Columbia, one of the early things that I would say to my students was, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And it has nothing to do with your performance. It has everything to do with my need for more information. It took them about 2 weeks to figure
Yeah.
out I really meant that. And then they began to ask questions, which is, of course, really what I wanted, was for
That's
them
right.
to get that curiosity. Yeah.
So true.
Ah, gosh. So we have four really important points. And I also like the idea of that, having a whole series of people that you go to for help,
Yeah.
because that's another characteristic of resilient people. They have good social support, people who will cheer them on.
Yeah. And
But
they know that. And look at the athletes. And people who study success, the athletes are the easiest example to look at because they have a coach for whatever their specialty is, right? Swimming, gymnastics, judo, etc. They have a weightlifting coach. They have a nutrition coach. They have they have a sports psychologist. They surround themselves with people. For them, the hardest part is when they retire and all those coaches disappear.
oh gosh,
Yeah,
I
and that's
never,
why I love working with them because they know how good a coach is.
ah,
So they
I
crave it.
never saw that before in my mind. Thank you, Ruth. That's just a total new understanding for me. Now, I've seen men who, I say men, also women, who
Mhm.
retire and suddenly have to change, but I never thought about it from an athlete's perspective. You're right. They have a huge team that supports them,
That's
and
right.
not the team that's on the field, but the team around them. Ah, wow.
Right. Who you never see.
Whom you
Who
never
you
see. That's right.
who you never see, but if you ask them who helped you get to that podium, they will mention all those people you never.
Absolutely. There's another aspect to all this, and that is how people define. There are
Yeah.
some, especially young people, they think they have to become a billionaire before they're successful. But there's also the person who says, "Look, I just want to have four healthy, happy children. And that to me will be success." Uh, Do you? Now, I know you looked at the high achievers, but
Mhm.
what's your thought about how these characteristics that you talk about reflect all these different ways to achieve success?
One of the things I realize is that everyone has a different definition, right? And one of the things I do when I coach people, I said, what does success look like for you? Because I am your mirror,
Yeah.
but I need to know at what point to hold up that mirror. Because what happens is if we can't define what it is, then how are we ever going to know if we've achieved it? And usually what I do is I'll ask them and I'll say, what does it look like when you've actually achieved that? What does that look like? What does that smell like? What does that feel like? What is the sound of that like?
Yeah.
And then they will blow right past it and not realize that they've gotten there. And I have to say, whoa, you said that your goal was to achieve X.
Mhm.
You achieved that 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Why are you saying you're not successful yet?
Not there yet.
If
Ah,
anything, you've achieved it 2 months ago. Now we need to make new goals.
ah. Oh, this is encouraging. This is really encouraging because, when you're a young person, you sometimes can't imagine all the possibilities.
That's right.
And you've given me permission to imagine to my knowledge base. And as my knowledge grows, I can change that
Yeah.
definition.
I change mine all the time. My goals fit on a 3x3 Post-it note.
Oh my goodness.
And I put about 3 goals for the year and then 3 goals for within 5 years. I want to achieve these 3, 4, 5 things.
Mm-hmm.
But I put that usually on my computer, on the screen or on the lamp on my desk, because this time, every time I'm asked to do something, I think will it get me closer or further away from the goal.
Beautiful.
And that's how you set boundaries. And that is how you stay focused, because there's so many people who want a piece of us, so many people who want us to do things, so many distractions. But if you have your goals in front of you and you have someone who holds you accountable and you're asking yourself this question every time you get asked to do something, you are going to blow through your goals and reach them so much faster that you have to set new ones. You're moving the goalposts all the time. And that's a good thing.
And that's a good thing. I agree. The, the 3 points, I was really struck by that because what I often advise my clients is each day decide the 3 most important things you're going to do for the day because we get
Yeah.
overwhelmed with our to-do lists and
Yep.
you get lost in them. I say, well,
Yep.
just pick the 3 most important and then do those 3
Yeah.
because then you will really achieve things. Now I'm hearing you and I'm saying, okay, Madeline, I think you ought to set some longer ones.
That's right.
But because in the end, even though I may not have set those, I'm testing every one of those 3 important ones in
Yep.
relationship to what is my sense of goal. Yeah.
That's right. So it holds you accountable. But the
Mhm.
other thing, and the 3 is, I'm reading the book, The Productivity Project right now, which talks all about the 3. And 3 is a number that we always use because we can remember it so easily.
Yes.
But we have to be careful that those 3 don't turn into busy work.
Yes.
And the other thing is we have to realize what kind of work we do at what time of the day. I am that morning person that wakes up naturally at 5 a.m. I've always been that morning person, which means I am the most productive during the morning hours, right? So I slowly have my coffee, and you can see between 6 and 11, I am getting a massive amount of work done.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, because that's when I'm the most focused, that is when I do what I call my deep cognitive work that requires the most focus. So for me, it's writing and editing and things like that. I do not waste that time doing more passive tasks, such as emails and social media and Zooms and things like that. That does not require the same level of focus. I can do those things when I'm a little groggier. And that's important because if I'm going to take an hour for a Zoom during my peak focus hours, then I can't be as focused in the afternoon
Yeah.
when I'm a little bit more sluggish. So I wasted an hour, but what I would have done in an hour in the morning could take me half a day in the afternoon.
Yes.
So once I realized that, I preserved my energy so that I could do the deep focus work during those deep cognitive hours of mine and save the passive tasks for when I'm mentally a little bit slower, right? Which is after lunch, but I'm still productive. And this way I was able to get a lot more done. And this is what the high achievers do. This is what I learned from them, all of them, right? They have their hours that they work out, the hours that they do certain workouts, the hours when they do their thinking versus reading, right? When are you designing experiments versus reading journal articles. It's really milking the time out of the day so that you are being the most productive and not wasting time.
Mm. That takes real discipline.
Oh, yes. Oh, they are extremely disciplined, the high achievers. But remember, they're also surrounding themselves with people who will keep them very disciplined.
Yeah. Let me come back to that book, The Productivity Process.
Productivity Project by Chris Bailey.
Project. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Always looking for good books. Thank you. All right. Well, I want us to pretend that one of us is just 25 again.
Oh, I like this.
You like this? Okay, I don't really know what I want to achieve in the long term. I really don't think I can change the way others work. Come on, I can't change a paradigm. I don't, I, how can I prepare myself so that when I finally understand it, I'm ready to roll?
You're talking to someone who at 25 was working in finance. Totally different life for me, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that I'd be interested in what I'm doing now. It wasn't even on my horizon. Certainly didn't think I'd write books. But what I knew was I have to surround myself with people who know more than I do in different fields. And I was only going to surround myself with people who are more knowledgeable, but are also good and nice people. So just being a big shot or a celebrity never impressed me. But if you're also a good person, now I want to get to know you better as a human being. And I have always done that, and see what you can help other people with before you ever ask for help from anybody. And if you're able to do that over time, you will have this extensive network of people. And that is very helpful because when you have a question, you have who to turn to.
Mm-hmm.
But when they have a question, they have who to turn to.
Yeah.
So I had to host a panel recently of high achievers, and this was a last minute thing. And they didn't think that we can get the people from my book. And I said, no problem. And I texted people, and in 10 minutes, we had 4 Olympians and a Paralympian who won between them, I think it was 18 or 19 medals. So, and then I had 2 Nobel Prize winners, 1 Nobel Prize winner, 1 Nobel nominee, who each came out with books. And they said, could you help me market a book? I don't know how to market a book. I know how to do science. I said, I wrote this best-selling book. I know how to market a book. So here I am helping Nobel Prize winners, but they also help me by sharing their story with me and posting about my book on their social media, etc. So there's always a way that we can help each other. And I think it's
There's,
creating a ripple effect.
yeah, there's deep wisdom in what you're saying because as a young person, it's easy for you to want to connect with as many people as possible, check things out. But to have those criteria, they have to be good people. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
they have to be knowledgeable, but they have to be good people. They have to be nice people.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's absolutely amazing. And if you can begin when you're young like that, you're right. You have created an incredible cadre of
Yeah.
potential mentors for you or coaches or whatever you want to say.
And you listen to people.
Yeah.
You listen to the ideas that they can plant in your head. I'm very close to my friends from elementary school, if you can believe it. And last night we were texting each other, and we had our 8th grade teacher before graduation made a prediction list of what everyone would be. It was pretty wrong. But for me, she wrote a nurse because I enjoyed science. And I remember when I was a freshman in college, I worked part-time at Ben and Jerry's, the ice cream parlor. And I'm an extrovert. I talk to everybody, right? And one of the regulars came and he said, what are you going to study in college? What do you want to be? And I said, I enjoy science. I'll probably be a nurse. And he said, why not a doctor? I had never seen a female doctor, so it hadn't even
Right.
occurred to me that
Right.
was a possibility.
Yeah. 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 Now I
So
know
I went back and I started taking science classes. I never went pre-med. I switched to a business major, but he planted a seed
Mhm.
and I listened to it. It was worth exploring.
Yeah.
And he planted a seed that I didn't even know existed. And that's how we can all help each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As you're talking, I'm thinking of the people in my life who have made those small little adjustments for me.
Yeah.
Because I've said this many times. My mother always said you could do anything you put your mind to. But at the same time, she spoke from her own experience. And so she thought I would become a fantastic secretary because that she knew what I could do and how I
Mm-hmm.
worked with things and et cetera. And then I met a math instructor, a math teacher, and he shifted me to understand that I had a real skill here, a real talent here. And so I completely went. I'll never forget the day I came to my mother and I said, I've changed. I'm going to be a math major. And from her knowledge, she said, you could teach that. And
Yeah.
she was right, but I've never taught math, I have to tell you. But I have used it all my life.
That's what's so interesting about mentoring. And I have another book coming out in the spring called The Financial Times Guide to Mentoring. And I share this information about how a mentor gives guidance. And when you do this, I've mentored thousands of people over my career. Sometimes you say things that are meaningless to you, right? Like that guy in the ice cream parlor who said, why not a doctor? It's
Yeah.
meaningless to you. You don't even think about it,
Mhm.
but it could be meaningful
Yeah.
to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I actually shared the story of one of my former mentees who called me one day. She finished medical school, but she was really not sure if medicine was for her anymore. And she was calling me just to figure out what she can do next. And I connected her with some people. To make a long story short, about 15 years later, I saw her at a conference where I was giving a talk. And she approached me later and we went out for coffee. And she said, do you remember that conversation we had? I said, yeah, I remember we had a conversation. She said, you remember you introduced me to whoever? I said, yeah, yeah. She said, when I emailed you for that conversation, that was a Hail Mary. I was going to quit medicine. I just couldn't take it anymore. And after that conversation and the conversations that led to it changed everything. Right now, she's the vice chair of her department now at UCSF.
Oh,
Brilliant pediatric anesthesiologist.
almost quit medicine.
And so that was a meaningless conversation to me because it was a regular mentoring conversation. I didn't think anything of it, but it was meaningful to her.
Yeah.
And my advice for everybody who's listening, I had no idea of that impact. If there's anyone who had an enormous impact on you, just send them an email or a text and let them know. Remember when you said that one thing or did that one thing?
Mhm.
I truly appreciate it. And even if it happened a quarter of a century ago, it's not too late to say thank you.
Ah, okay, I'm going to. I promise.
Awesome.
It says another lesson to me, or another potential action, and that is that when I talk to people, whether I'm coaching them, mentoring, or just in conversation, I need to watch my words because we
Mm.
don't know what that impact will be. And if I keep I'd like your good and nice.
Mm.
If I think about that, can I say something good or nice to this person? At least I
Yeah,
can lift them up that way.
that's
Okay, I'm
right.
going to change the rules now.
Okay.
Now,
I'm not 25 anymore.
now you're now 55,
Ooh,
and you've achieved a lot, but you haven't achieved all that you set out to do. Is it
yeah.
too late to achieve success?
No, you're talking to somebody who went back to school at 43. You know what? You can hang up your sneakers when you're ready to hang up your sneakers. You can keep changing things as often as you want, whenever you want. As long as you can pay your bills and stay with your family, you can keep changing and keep doing and keep reinventing yourself.
That's encouraging. but are there specific things that this person can do? There are a lot of people who find themselves being riffed because of technology replacing them,
Yep.
or the economy shifting. We have a good economy today in this country, regardless of what people say. It's pretty good. But still, there are these disruptions. What can you do to really prepare yourself for that moment?
I think it goes back to the same principles and same foundations of where is that passion now that you are at 55?
Mm-hmm.
And then what would the goal be, right? That you align with that. What are the milestones that need to happen in order to achieve that goal? And now we start reverse engineering it. And this is what we do all day, every day with people. But it's figuring out what you want to do and how to get there. And that reverse engineering is half the battle. And that's what most people don't do. They say, I want to write a book. That's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But now let's reverse engineer. What do you need to do if you want to write a book, right? You need to have a book proposal. You need to have a following. You need to have an idea. You need to show that you can write. All of these things that need to happen. Let's start. Let's start. Open that Word document.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. But most people don't even open that Word document. They'll just say, I want to write a book, and then somehow it's magically supposed to happen. It doesn't work that way.
Hmm. Now, you've talked about passion, and I know you invited people to send to your website for the passion audit. Can you give us a few hints about how you find your passion?
So there are certain questions that I ask, and it's a simple 3-column exercise to differentiate between what you are good at, what you are not good at, what you are good at and enjoy, what you are good at and don't enjoy, what you would do for free if you could. And I ask, for example, how do you spend your weekends, your time on your weekends? Where are you volunteering? Because that gives a lot of insight.
Yeah.
And it gives a lot of insight because no one's paying you to do this. You're doing this because you want to. So if you want to, let's figure out how you got there, right? And
Mm.
why you're doing it. And that really is quite revealing. And how can you get paid to do that?
This is, for me, this is very gratifying to hear you say this, because I never in my wildest dreams would think that I would be a TV host interviewing people. Just that I wouldn't, nothing. And I love it. I so enjoy meeting people like you and having not just a 5-minute conversation saying, how do you do? What do you do? How do those kinds of things? What do they call it? Speed dating. This
Yeah,
is a real conversation.
that's right.
so, so you're right. You suddenly find yourself really thinking about what it is that you enjoy and that you would do for free. Yeah.
That's right. And what people don't realize, and maybe we'll let the cat out of the bag, it is hard to be a host because you need to think on your feet. You never know what's coming out of the guest's mouth, and you need to be able to respond intelligently. I've
That's right.
done it. It's hard.
Thank you. It is true. It is true. And it comes down to listening. I remember when I was being interviewed, uh, I would rate the person who was interviewing me on the basis of whether they actually had a follow on question that reflected something that I said and was not just a kind of programmed set
That's
of
right.
questions. Yeah. So,
That's right.
yeah, that's you. And that's, you get to the end of these and you're exhausted.
But it's
But
fun.
that's okay. It's fun.
But it's fun.
Precisely. Precisely. Okay. We've really talked about when you're 25, what you need to do, 55, what you need to do. Let's just talk then more generally, because I want the audience to really hear specific things that they can do today to not just set the goal, but to just prepare themselves so that when they get it clear in their minds, heck, it took me into my 40s before I figured out what what did you call it? The reason for breathing. I
The
love that
reason
phrase,
for
by the way.
breathing.
Yeah. And fortunately, I had done some things that weren't completely off the mark, but still, it took me a long time. So I'll stop talking and let you talk.
So, what can we do now is the question.
That's right.
I think we start with reading The Success Factor,
Sounds like a good idea.
which talks about the 4 elements of
Mhm.
success, but also teaches people how they can achieve it. So I'm an adult educator. I can't just tell you what to do without teaching you how to
Mhm.
do it. But you know what I realized, Madeline, is what works for you is not going to work for me because we're different people. And what works for me today may not work for me in 6 months from now or a year from now. So I need to be able to have options. So that is why for each of the 4 elements, when I talk about them, I give a lot of options. And one of the things I love is when people either 2 things, they share their favorite stories with me from the book. And it's different for every person. This one
Yeah,
likes the
yeah.
NBA champion. This one likes somebody who argued 50 cases before the Supreme Court of the United States. Everyone has
I like the
something different.
astronaut.
The astronauts are cool. I only found this out last week when I was hosting a panel. The Olympic champions and astronauts and Nobel Prize winners, not just those who are in the book, but others are reading the book as well. And NBA players and all of these people are reading it. And they told me it's right by their bedside. Because if they're having a hard time with something, they'll look up, okay, let me try this. And I was like, oh, this is that 4th element of success. You're an NBA champion, you're an Olympic champion, and yet you're still looking for ways to improve. And you're
Oh,
looking to learn from others.
yeah.
And that's our
Oh,
4th element of success. So to me, that is reassuring that the work here is important. The work here will live on. There's always more to learn, always more to do. And I look forward to interviewing more incredible people and sharing their stories with the world.
fabulous. Fabulous. Well, Ruth Gotian, this has been such a fun conversation, and you have helped me so much in several little things. I may come back to you and say, do you remember when? So again, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your willingness to share these amazing stories.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. Today's Grounds for Thought: The War of Art. Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. Writing to Professionals, the book is written as 3 books called in order: Resistance, Combating Resistance, and Beyond Resistance. The foreword of this book I found to be very helpful because it was by Robert McKee. Now, if you don't know who Robert McKee is, he wrote the book Story, Substance, Structure, Style, and the Principles of Screenwriting. So, in other words, McKee knows what writing is about, and he can tell a story as well as anyone. And that's saying a lot. Needless to say, I was captured by the foreword and felt compelled to read it through. Now, I admit it, I don't always read the foreword or the preface or even the table of contents, because if I can get away with it, I just dive into the book. And I want the patient to dig in. So, why am I talking about the foreword? Because of one sentence McKee wrote. To begin book 1, Pressfield labels the enemy of creativity resistance, his all-encompassing term for what Freud called the death wish, that destructive force inside human nature that rises whenever we consider a tough, long-term course of action that might do for us or others something that's actually good. You know that I tend to see the world from a resilient perspective. I tend to brush resistance aside almost as an annoyance. When I realized this, I knew I had to look more carefully at Pressfield's book and see how he worked with resistance. He says resistance cannot be seen, touched, heard, or smelled, but it can be felt. We experience it as an energy field radiating from a work in potential. Notice he uses work in potential, not work in progress. It's a repelling force. It's negative. its aim is to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. In fact, what Ruth talked about was our reason for breathing. This small paragraph changed the way I looked at resilience. I have always looked at resilience from the perspective of what is it that characterizes highly resilient people. Then I have to do, all I have to do is find ways to develop those characteristics in myself. But Sun Tzu says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, then every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Let's focus on that first condition. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Needless to say, Pressfield helped me understand the enemy of resilience, namely resistance. It's a repelling force. It's negative. Its aim is to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. To me, it is about more than work. There are times when we resist having an uncomfortable conversation with someone, or maybe it's a time when we resist correcting an inappropriate behavior. The list goes on. As I considered this, I realized that in these situations, we fear losing the connection with the other person. Yet the resilient person has a strong social support circle, which means that the loss of one may be painful, but it is filled in by the other members of the circle. And Ruth and I talked about that. Pressfield didn't realize he was talking to me, but I listened and learned more about my own idea of expertise of resilience when I looked at it from another perspective of resistance, the enemy of resilience. Talk about grounds for thought. It made me think, and I hope it makes you think too. And by the way, Pressfield also tells us about how a professional overcomes resistance. And to me, they look familiar. The War of Art. It looks like this. I get it there. Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. And if you'd like to explore what it means to build and nurture your resilience with me as a mentor, schedule a conversation by sending me an email to madeline@madelineblair.com. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.